Jinwoo frowned at the message on his screen. It was from his sister, Yuna. Final reminder. Your appointment is tomorrow at 10 a.m. Don't be late. He sighed and put his phone down on the workbench. Around him, the small garage was filled with the comfortable smell of metal and old motor oil. He was rebuilding the engine of a vintage scooter, a hobby he loved. It was simple. It made sense. You followed the diagrams, you used the right tools, and things worked. There were no strange surprises. The appointment was for the Panspecies Psi Assessment Institute. Yuna worked there. She was a xenopsychologist, a fancy word for someone who studied how alien minds worked. For weeks, she had been asking him for a favor. She needed a human test subject for a routine machine check. A null baseline, she called it. His phone buzzed again. It was Yuna calling. You saw my message, she said. Her voice had that mix of professional calm and sisterly pressure he knew very well. I saw it, Jinwoo said, wiping his hands on a rag. I'm still not sure. It sounds weird. Sitting in a room so aliens can read my thoughts. It's not reading thoughts, Jinwoo. It's measuring potential psychic resonance. Psi. And you don't have any. That's the point. For every other species in the galactic community, it's a normal part of biology, like hearing or smell. But humans measure a perfect flat line. 0. You're a perfect control subject. We use your 0 to make sure our machines are working right before we test species that actually have Psi. Jinwoo picked up a wrench, turning it over in his hands. So I'm basically a living piece of calibration equipment. You're helping science, and you're helping me. My director needs a human subject to finish the quarterly review. Please? It's 1 hour of your life. You just sit there. They give you a crystal to look at. You try to focus. The machine reads nothing. We all go home. I'll even buy you lunch after. That barbecue place you like. He could hear the earnest need in her voice. Yuna was the academic, the one who had soared into this new, strange world of galactic integration. He was the one who kept things grounded, fixing the lights and wiring in the old neighborhoods that hadn't changed much. He owed her for a lot of things, mostly for being his sister. Fine, he said. 1 hour. And you're paying for the extra side of ribs. The next morning, he took the high-speed transit to the Institute district. The buildings here were different. They curved in ways human buildings didn't, made of materials that seemed to shimmer. The Psi Assessment Institute was a tall, silent spire that looked like a giant, smooth quartz crystal growing from the ground. Inside, the air was cool and still. A soft, harmonic hum seemed to come from the walls themselves. He saw aliens in the lobby. A tall, willowy being with blue skin meditated quietly in a corner, a faint glow around its long fingers. A smaller, furry creature with large eyes was staring intently at a water fountain, making the droplets dance in midair. Everyone was so focused, so quiet. He felt loud. His boots seemed to clomp on the polished floor. The sound of him clearing his throat was too sharp. Yuna met him at the security desk. She wore a neat gray suit, her hair pulled back. She looked professional, but he saw the relief in her eyes. You came. Thank you. Just follow me, and try not to stare. Hard not to? Jinwoo mumbled, watching as a floating orb of light glided past, trailing soft chimes. She led him down a softly lit corridor. The procedure is very simple. Director Kale will explain everything. He's Vrin, very respected. Just be polite and do what he says. They entered a large, circular control room. One wall was a clear window looking into a smaller, hexagonal chamber. Inside the chamber was a single, comfortable chair and a complex piece of equipment on a pedestal. It held a large, perfect gemstone that glowed with a soft inner light. Director Kale was there. He was tall and slender, with a fine, gray membrane covering his body that reminded Jinwoo of a moth's wings. His large, dark eyes were kind but held a distant, scholarly look. He inclined his head, a graceful gesture. Mr. Lee Jinwoo, thank you for your participation. I am Director Kale. Your sister has explained the purpose of this calibration. She said I'm a 0, a flat line, Jinwoo said. A precise and stable null signature. Director Kale corrected gently. It is of great value. The machine, he gestured to the equipment in the chamber, is the most sensitive psi meter on this planet. It can measure the focus of a Vryn scholar from 3 star systems away. But to ensure its accuracy, we must first confirm it reads nothing from a proven null source. That is you. You will sit, wear the neural lace, and attempt to focus your consciousness on the resonance crystal. The process is harmless. Jinwoo looked at the chair. And what am I supposed to focus on? Anything. Or nothing. The content is irrelevant. It is the act of focused consciousness we measure. For other species, this is a natural state. For humans, Director Kale's voice was not unkind, merely factual. It presents a challenge, as your species lacks the innate psychic architecture. The meter will show nothing, and we will know the machine is ready for true subjects. A young human technician, introduced as Lee, gave Jinwoo a quick, sympathetic smile from behind a console. It's really painless, sir. Like getting a hearing test. Great, Jinwoo said. He felt like a prop, a biological tool. He followed Yuna into the hexagonal chamber. The air was even quieter here, almost thick. Just relax, Yuna whispered, helping him put on a light mesh cap. The neural lace felt cool against his scalp. Think about that scooter engine. It'll be over before you know it. She left, closing the door with a soft click. Jinwoo was alone in the silent, humming room. He sat in the chair, which adjusted automatically to his shape. He looked at the glowing crystal. He tried to focus. Almost immediately, his mind drifted. He wondered what kind of wiring they used in this building. The walls hummed. Was it a harmonic current or just fancy air conditioning? The glow of the crystal reminded him of the faulty LED sign he had fixed last week. His focus wasn't on the crystal. It was on a dozen little things all at once. The machine in front of him, with its delicate crystal core, registered his psychic presence. The readout on the console in the control room was a steady, unwavering, perfect 0. The silence in the calibration chamber was not peaceful. To Jinwoo, it felt heavy. It was the quiet of a library mixed with the waiting feeling of a doctor's office. He shifted in the chair, which was too comfortable. It made him want to fidget. Through the clear window, he could see Director Kale and Yuna in the control room. Director Kale was studying a large screen, his long, delicate fingers moving in the air to control the display. Yuna stood beside him, her arms crossed. She gave Jinwoo a small, encouraging nod. A gentle, synthetic voice filled the chamber. Phase 1 calibration. Please attempt to clear your mind. Focus your conscious awareness on the resonance crystal before you. Jinwoo looked at the crystal. It was beautiful, he supposed. It pulsed with a light that seemed to come from deep inside it, like a captured piece of a star. He tried to do as he was told. He tried to think about nothing but the crystal. This lasted for about 7 seconds. First, he noticed a tiny, almost invisible seam on the surface of the crystal pedestal. Probably where the maintenance panel is, he thought. His electrician's mind pictured the fasteners. Would they be standard or some alien design? He wondered what power source made the crystal glow. Was it a form of electroluminescence or something stranger? His eyes stayed on the crystal, but his mind was pulling it apart into components and schematics. The soft voice spoke again. Calibration stable. Null reading confirmed. Please deepen your focus. Visualize your consciousness merging with the crystal's resonance. Jinwoo tried harder. He squinted a little. Merge with the crystal, he repeated in his head. He thought about merging 2 wires. You stripped the insulation, twisted the copper strands together, sealed them with a cap. Was it like that? He imagined his thoughts as a bare wire, trying to touch the light of the crystal. Felt silly. He fought off a smile. In the control room, the main screen displayed a perfectly flat, green line. Beside it, the numerical psi reading showed 0.00. Consistently stable, Director Kale said, his voice a soft rustle of satisfaction. A perfect null field. Just as the literature states, human consciousness, while complex, generates no coherent psychic waveform. It is inert in this spectrum. Yuna nodded, but she was watching her brother's face. She knew that slightly blank, distracted look in his eyes. He wasn't meditating. He was miles away, thinking about something completely different. Inside the chamber, Jinwoo was indeed far away. The pressure to focus had backfired. His brain, bored with the impossible task, went looking for a puzzle it could solve. It found the wiring problem from the old apartment building he'd been working on yesterday. A faulty circuit breaker kept tripping on the 4th floor. The building manager was annoyed. Jinwoo had traced the wires but hadn't found the short yet. Now, alone with nothing to do, his mind started running the wires again. He pictured the conduit running up the building's wall. He thought about the old insulation. Maybe it wasn't a short in the tenant's apartment. Maybe it was where the main line passed through the roof access panel. Water damage from last week's rain could have dripped down. His breathing slowed. His eyes, still pointed at the glowing crystal, lost their focus. He was no longer seeing the test chamber. He was seeing copper wire and plastic conduit. He was following a mental map of the problem. It was a real, tangible thing he could fix, unlike this weird crystal focus business. Remarkably flat, Director Kale noted, pointing to a secondary screen showing brainwave activity. See the pattern? High-frequency noise, low coherence. It is constant mental chatter. No harmonic signature emerges. It is like trying to hear a single voice in a crowded market. The technician, Lee, leaned forward. The activity isn't decreasing, sir. It's just scattered. Different parts of his brain are lighting up independently. Look, now the visual cortex is active, but the prefrontal lobe is quieting down. It's like he's daydreaming with his eyes open. That is the human state, Director Kale said. A torrent of unfocused thought. It creates a kind of psychic static. Perfect shield, ironically. They cannot project Psi because their own mental noise drowns it out. Jinwoo's daydream deepened. He was mentally unscrewing the cover of the roof access electrical box. In his mind's eye, he saw the telltale greenish streak of corrosion on the main terminal. There it is, he thought with a silent click of satisfaction. That was the problem. A slow leak, not a sudden short. The solution was simple. Replace the terminal block, seal the conduit entry. For a single, fleeting second, the satisfaction of solving the puzzle cleared the mental chatter. All the scattered brain activity briefly synchronized, not to focus on the crystal but to celebrate a solution found. It was a moment of pure, subconscious clarity. On the monitor, the flat green line quivered. Just a tiny, almost imperceptible ripple. The number flickered. 0.00, 0.00, 0.01, then back to 0.00. Director Kale saw it. A sensor ghost, he dismissed. Atmospheric fluctuation. Ignore it. The result is clear. The human Psi signature is null. The calibration is valid. We can proceed to test the first true subject. He pressed a button. The gentle voice returned to the chamber. Calibration complete. You may relax. Please remain seated for sensor detachment. The sound broke Jinwoo's reverie. He blinked, coming back to the room. The crystal came back into focus. He hadn't merged with anything. He had, however, figured out his wiring problem. He felt oddly refreshed, like after a good nap. He saw Yuna giving him a thumbs up through the window. He had done his job. He had been a perfect zero. He hadn't felt a thing. And the machine, for all its sensitivity, had agreed. A soft tone sounded, and the door to the chamber slid open with a quiet sigh. Yuna walked in, a relieved smile on her face. Perfect, she said, reaching to carefully remove the neural lace from his head. You did great. A textbook null reading. Jinwoo rubbed his scalp where the mesh had been. Great, so I was boring. That's what you wanted. The best kind of boring, she said. Predictable. Scientific. He stood up from the chair, his joints cracking after sitting still. He glanced at the glowing crystal one more time. So that's it? I can go. Director Kale entered the chamber, his movements graceful and silent. Thank you for your time, Mr. Lee. Your participation was most valuable. The calibration is confirmed. The machine is ready for true measurement. Jinwoo nodded, not sure what the proper response was. Glad to help. He just wanted to get back to his garage, to the world of wrenches and wires that made sense. As they walked back into the control room, Jinwoo saw Technician Lee preparing the console for the next subject. On the main screen, the data from his session was displayed. The flat green line, the big, confident zeros. It was proof of his own mental nothingness in their terms. It felt a little strange, seeing it laid out like that. I must prepare for the next subject, Director Kale said, turning to Yuna. A Thelian diplomat. Their meditative focus is quite profound. Please see your brother out. He gave a slight, respectful bow of his head to Jinwoo before turning away, his attention already on the next important task. Come on, Yuna said, touching Jinwoo's arm. I'll walk you to the lobby. They moved back into the quiet hallway. The sense of peaceful focus from the other beings was even more noticeable after the sterility of the chamber. Jinwoo felt a growing need to hear some normal noise, maybe traffic sounds or the clang of tools. So, lunch? Yuna asked as they reached the main lobby with its shimmering walls. Yeah, sure, Jinwoo said, but his mind was already drifting back to the problem he had solved during the test. The corroded terminal block. He needed to call the building manager, schedule a time to go up on the roof. He should check his stock. Did he have a weatherproof replacement block? Or would he need to order one? Jinwoo. He blinked. Sorry. What? Yuna smiled. You're already somewhere else. Look, I just need 5 minutes to file the participation form. Can you wait here? Then we can go right to the restaurant. Here. Jinwoo looked around the lobby. The meditating blue-skinned being was still there, now with a faint, shimmering aura. It was unnerving. Isn't there a break room or something? A waiting area with a chair? Yuna thought for a second. You can wait in the calibration chamber. It's empty now and it's quiet. Just don't touch anything. I'll be very fast. Quiet was better than weird, Jinwoo decided. Okay, 5 minutes. She led him back the way they came. Director Kale and Lee were now deeply engaged in the control room, their backs to the window, studying new data on the screens. Yuna opened the chamber door for Jinwoo. Just sit. I'll be right back. She gave him a little push inside and the door closed behind him. Alone again. The room hummed with the same low energy. The chair was still there, and the crystal still glowed on its pedestal. He had no intention of sitting back in that chair. He wandered over to the far wall, away from the window, and leaned against it. He pulled out his personal comm device, a slightly battered rectangle of black glass. He opened his work notes. There it was, the diagram for the old apartment building's 4th floor electrical. He zoomed in on the section for the roof access. His thumb moved, making a quick, rough sketch over the image. He drew a circle around the main junction box. He added a note to himself, corrosion at terminal, water ingress from conduit seal. He then started a list of materials he would need. A new terminal block, waterproof sealing gel, maybe a length of conduit if the old one was cracked. He became absorbed in the task. This was his kind of focus. Not empty-minded staring, but solving a real problem with his hands, even if just on a screen for now. He hummed a tuneless little song under his breath. An old children's tune he didn't even know he remembered. In the control room, Technician Lee was running a final diagnostic on the Psi meter. Director Kale had stepped away to his office to review the Thelian diplomat's file. The system was in a passive, broad-spectrum monitoring mode, its sensors still active and sampling the ambient energy of the chamber. It was standard procedure, meant to ensure a stable environment for the next subject. Lee watched the baseline readings on his secondary screen. They showed the usual background hum of the building systems, a faint, steady whisper. Suddenly, a new pattern emerged. It was a low, rhythmic pulse of energy, chaotic and messy, completely unlike the clean, harmonic frequencies of psychic focus. It was more like mental noise. He frowned. The source was clearly the calibration chamber. The human was still in there. But the test was over. The neural lace was off. Why was the system picking up anything at all? He adjusted the view, filtering out the building's hum. The chaotic pulse grew clearer. It wasn't powerful. It was incredibly diffuse, spread across a wide band of frequencies. It was the psychic equivalent of radiostatic. It was so low-level that the main psi meter, calibrated for strong, clear signals, was ignoring it, still reading 0 on its primary display. But the diagnostic sensors were more sensitive. They were picking up the background rumble of a human mind in its natural state. Not trying to focus, not trying to be null, just thinking, planning, remembering a song. Lee saw the numbers on his diagnostic screen begin to twitch. The ambient psi level in the chamber was no longer a perfect 0. It was a fluctuating, messy 0.02, 0.05, 0.03. It was nothing to worry about, he knew. Just noise. Human mental chatter. Director Kale had called it a perfect shield. Lee made a note on his log. Post-test ambient residual from human subject. Confirms baseline psychic white noise theory. He looked through the window. Jinwoo was just leaning against the wall, looking at his phone, one foot tapping slightly. He wasn't concentrating on anything important. He was just waiting, and his mind all by itself was generating more measurable psychic static than the machine had ever detected from him before. Jinwoo finished his material list and closed the work file on his comm device. The problem was solved, at least on paper. A small feeling of satisfaction settled in his chest. He looked up and realized he was still in the quiet, humming room. He checked the time. Yuna had been gone for more than 5 minutes. He sighed and pushed himself off the wall. He was starting to feel restless. The room was too clean, too silent. He walked slowly around the edge of the hexagonal chamber, looking at nothing in particular. His fingers traced a seam in the wall paneling. He wondered again about the wiring behind it. To pass the time, he reopened his comm device. He didn't go back to work notes. Instead, he opened a simple puzzle game. It was a logic game with colored wires that needed to be connected to matching batteries. It was mindless, familiar. His thumbs moved quickly, sliding the digital wires into place. Click, click, click. As he played, his mind drifted further. The puzzle wires made him think of the real wires in the apartment building. That made him remember the building manager's annoyed face. That reminded him he needed to call him after lunch. He wondered if Yuna would mind if he made a quick call now. Probably. He kept playing. A part of his brain was focused on the game, finding the connections. Another part was planning his afternoon. Another part was lightly critiquing the game's color scheme. It was a gentle, rolling chaos of thought, none of it deep or heavy. It was just how his mind worked when it was left alone. In the control room, Technician Lee watched his screens. The chaotic pulse from the chamber had changed. It was no longer just a low rumble. It had developed a rhythm. Sharp little spikes of activity would appear, followed by smoother waves. Lee leaned closer. The spikes matched exactly when the human subject solved a connection in his puzzle game. The smoother waves seemed to be the planning, the wandering thoughts in between moves. It was incredible. The man's psychic noise was directly mapping onto his mundane activity. His unfocused consciousness was painting a clear picture on the most sensitive sensors in the building. The primary psi meter, the big one for official measurements, still showed 0. It was looking for a laser beam of focused mental energy. What it was getting from Jinwoo was the soft, scattered light of a lamp in a foggy room. The machine dismissed it, but the diagnostic array was fascinated. The numbers climbed slowly, steadily. 0.08, 0.12. It was as if the simple act of relaxing into his own natural state of distracted thinking was turning up the volume of his mental presence. It wasn't powerful, but it was everywhere across the spectrum. Director Kale returned to the control room, a data slate in his hand. "Is the environment stable for the Thelian?" he asked, not looking at the screens. "Almost, sir," Lee said, his voice curious. "The human subject is still in the chamber, waiting. And there's an interesting ambient reading. Residual energy from the neural lace. It will fade," Director Kale said dismissively, looking over the Thelian's profile. "I don't think it's residual, sir. The lace has been off for over 8 minutes. This is live. It's fluctuating with what he's doing. Look. Lee pointed to his secondary monitor where a jagged, lively graph danced. Director Kale glanced at it. He saw the messy, vibrant pattern. He saw the numerical value. 0.15 psi. His large, dark eyes narrowed for a second. Then he shook his head. Background cognitive static. I told you. It is psychic white noise. It has no coherence, no purpose. It is the sound of a brain that does not know how to be quiet. It is not true psi. It is the absence of psi. Mop water is not the same as a clear stream, Technician Lee. He turned to look through the window into the chamber. Jinwoo was slouched slightly, totally absorbed in his game, one hand in his pocket. He looked profoundly ordinary. The meter is correct to read 0. Director Kale continued. That chatter is not what we measure. The Thelian will produce a clean, singular tone of 5.0 psi or higher. That is signal. This, he gestured at Lee's screen, is noise. Ignore it. Lee nodded, but he kept watching. He saw the number nudge up to 0.18. Jinwoo had just solved a particularly tricky puzzle level. A small, unconscious smile had appeared on the man's face. Inside the chamber, Jinwoo finally beat his own high score. The game played a little fanfare. The sound was tiny from his device, but in the total silence of the room, it seemed loud. The fanfare triggered a sudden, vivid memory. It was the tune from an old video game he played as a child, in his friend Tamin's basement. The memory arrived whole. The smell of stale potato chips, the feel of the worn controller, Tamin laughing when he won. It was a flash of pure, unfiltered recollection. For that single second, all the scattered parts of Jinwoo's brain aligned. The puzzle-solving focus, the satisfaction, the sudden nostalgia. They all fused into one sharp, bright point of conscious experience. He wasn't trying to make it happen. It just did. In the control room, every alarm on the diagnostic array went silent. The messy, jagged graph on Lee's screen did something impossible. For one fleeting blip of time, all the noise canceled out. The chaotic wave suddenly became a perfect, clean, vertical spike. The number didn't climb. It jumped. From 0.18, it leapt to 1.7. Then, just as quickly, it collapsed back into the noisy chatter as the memory faded, and Jinwoo, startled by the strength of his own memory, blinked and looked around the empty room. What was that? Lee whispered, his eyes wide. Director Kale was staring now, his scholarly calm broken. A sensor echo, a feedback loop from the game device. But his voice lacked certainty. He had never seen a graph do that. The spike was cleaner and sharper than anything he had seen from a trained Thelian novice. And it had come from the middle of the mental noise. On the primary psi meter, the number finally twitched. It flickered from 0.00 to 0.01, then back. Jinwoo, hearing nothing but the hum of the room, put his comm device away. He felt a little silly, getting lost in a memory like that. He walked back to the window and looked out at the control room, raising his eyebrows as if to ask, how much longer? He saw Director Kale and Technician Lee staring right at him. They looked like they had seen a ghost. The moment stretched. Jinwoo, on one side of the glass, felt a knot of embarrassment in his stomach. He had probably broken some rule. Maybe games weren't allowed. Maybe they saw him slouching. He straightened up and offered a small, awkward smile. On the other side, Director Kale and Technician Lee were frozen. The sharp, clear spike on the graph had vanished, but the evidence was still there, frozen in the data log. A single point of perfect coherence rising from the psychic noise like a needle from a haystack. Replay the last 30 seconds, Director Kale said, his voice low. Lee's hands moved quickly over the console. The graph rewound and played back. They watched the messy, rolling waves of Jinwoo's background thoughts. They saw the moment the memory hit. The chaotic lines all snapped into alignment, forming that single, impossible spike. It lasted less than a second before crumbling back into noise. It is not feedback, Director Kale murmured, more to himself than to Lee. It is synthesis, sir, Lee asked. He was not focusing. He was not trying to use Psi. He was. The director struggled for the human word. He was daydreaming. And for one moment all the scattered pieces of his consciousness came together by accident. They resonated. Through the window, they saw Jinwoo looking more uncomfortable. He pointed at the door, mouthing the words, "Can I go?" Director Kale ignored him. His scientific mind was racing, overturning years of accepted theory. Humanity was not a null field. It was a cacophony. But a cacophony under the right conditions could accidentally produce a pure tone. A terrifying, powerful tone. "Put the chamber audio on," Director Kale instructed. A click sounded, and Jinwoo's voice suddenly filled the control room, hesitant and tinny through the speaker. "Hello? Everything okay? My sister said to wait. But, Mr. Lee," Director Kale's voice came through the chamber speaker, calm but intense. "Please do not be alarmed. We are observing an interesting anomaly. Please, resume what you were doing." Jinwoo looked baffled. "Resume? You mean, play the game? If you wish, or simply relax. Do not try to focus on the crystal. Just be as you were." This made no sense to Jinwoo, but the director's tone was serious. He shrugged and pulled his comm device out again. The puzzle game felt stupid now with them watching. He closed it. He didn't know what to do. He just leaned back against the wall and tried to be as he was. His mind, however, was now self-conscious. He kept circling back to the two people staring at him. What do they want? Did I break something? Yuna is going to be annoyed. The natural, wandering flow was gone, replaced by a loop of low-grade worry. On the screens, the psychic noise was still there, but it had changed. It was tighter, more repetitive. The numbers dropped back to a jittery 0.05. "He's trying now," Lee observed. "He's trying to be normal. It's blocking it." Director Kale nodded slowly. "The state is fragile. It requires genuine, unconscious absorption. He cannot force it." A profound realization was dawning on him. The greatest human psychic events would never happen in a lab. They would happen in workshops, in studios, during moments of lost-in-thought problem-solving. They were invisible because no one knew where to look. "Sir, should we end this? The Thelian diplomat is scheduled," Lee said cautiously. "Reschedule them," Director Kale said, his eyes fixed on Jinwoo. "This is more important." In the chamber, Jinwoo's patience was thinning. He was hungry. He wanted his barbecue lunch. This was worse than the actual test. He looked at his comm device again, not to play, but to check the time. He opened his work notes once more, just to have something to look at. His eyes scanned the list of materials. Terminal block, sealing gel, conduit. The practical part of his brain kicked in, pushing the worry aside. He needed to see if he had the right size of block. He mentally pictured his garage shelves. He saw the bins of parts. The blue bin for connectors. Was the terminal block in the blue bin or the red one? He thought he used the last one on the Choi job. He'd need to order more. He opened a supplier website on his device, his brow furrowing. He was no longer thinking about the test. He was back in his own world, a world of inventory and practical logistics. The self-conscious loop broke. His mind began to flow freely again, navigating a space he understood perfectly. In the control room, the messy graph smoothed out. It became less jagged, more purposeful. The numbers began to climb again. 0.10, 0.15. Jinwoo found the supplier. He saw the terminal block. He needed part number P4472. But the listing was unclear. Was it the nickel-plated one or the tin-plated one for the price? Nickel was better for damp environments. The roof was a damp environment. He needed to be sure. He zoomed in on the product image, comparing it to the one in his memory. All his mental energy, the visual memory of his garage, the technical knowledge of metals, the focus on the screen, converged on a single silent question. Is this the right part? It was a moment of deep, effortless integration. Not of trying to be psychic, but of trying to be a good electrician. The graph on the screen did not spike this time. It swelled. The chaotic waves synchronized, merging into a single, massive, rolling hill of coherent energy. It wasn't a sharp needle. It was a tidal wave of focused subconscious processing. The primary psi meter, which had ignored everything until now, finally reacted. Its sensitive crystal core began to vibrate, detecting a psychic waveform of unbelievable clarity and raw, unfiltered power. But it was a waveform the machine's programming did not recognize. It was not a meditative signal. It was a problem-solving signal. The number on the main display, which had only ever shown zeros for humans, began to change. It blinked. 0.00, 1.45, 5.88. Error. A soft, crystalline chime, the sound the meter made when exceeding its safe parameters, echoed through the control room. Then, with a sound like a cracking ice cube, a fine web of fractures appeared across the surface of the meter's large, central crystal. The glow within it flickered wildly. Every light on the console flashed red. In the chamber, the main lights dimmed for a full second before surging back. Jinwoo jumped, his comm device almost falling from his hand. "What the?" he said aloud, his heart pounding. He looked around the now flickering room, then at the two shocked faces in the control room. The psi meter's main screen displayed one final, stubborn message before it went dark. Parameter exceeded. The machine built to measure the focused might of galactic consciousness had just been broken by a human wondering about a plumbing supply part. For a few seconds, there was only the sound of the emergency lights powering up with a low buzz. The main glow from the ceiling was gone. The gentle hum of the chamber was replaced by an alarmed, pulsing beep from the control room. Jinwoo stood frozen, his back against the wall. He stared at the fractured crystal on the pedestal. Its inner light was gone, dead and dark. He was sure, completely sure, he had broken it. He didn't know how, but the proof was right in front of him. His mind filled with a single, clear thought. Yuna is going to kill me. In the control room, the silence was deeper. Director Kale stood as still as a statue, his large dark eyes reflecting the flashing red alerts on the console screens. The data was still flowing, even though the primary sensor was damaged. The secondary graphs showed the aftermath. The huge, coherent wave of energy had vanished the moment Jinwoo was startled. It had collapsed back into the usual noisy chatter, which was now spiking with his panic. Technician Lee was the first to move. His hands flew over the console, silencing the alarms, pulling up the data logs. His face was pale. Primary crystal matrix is fractured. The core is non-responsive. It overloaded, sir. The safety limits were triggered. Director Kale did not look at him. He was staring through the window at Jinwoo. He saw a confused, worried young man, not a powerful psychic. He saw the person who had just accidentally produced a psychic signature so potent it broke equipment designed for masters. "The energy peak," Director Kale said, his voice a dry whisper. "When did it occur?" "Precisely." Lee called up the log. He matched the timestamp with the chamber's audio recording. He played the last few seconds. They heard Jinwoo's faint tapping on his device. They heard his soft, absent-minded mutter, "Nickel or tin, damp environment," then the crystal chime and the crack. It peaked at the moment he was comparing metal plating for a terminal block, Lee said, disbelief heavy in his words. Director Kale finally turned from the window. He looked at the shattered crystal, then at the data. The evidence was undeniable. This was not an attack. It was not even an effort. It was a side effect, a byproduct of a human mind working at its most natural, most absorbed state. "We have to get him out of there," Lee said, glancing at Jinwoo, who was now cautiously approaching the window with his hands up, as if surrendering. "Not yet," Director Kale said. He moved to the console and pressed the button for the chamber speaker. "Mr. Lee, please do not be alarmed. You are not in trouble. Can you tell me what you were thinking about just before the lights flickered?" Jinwoo's voice came through, shaky. I was looking at a parts website. For work. I was trying to figure out which terminal block to order." "Why? What happened? Did I break that crystal thing?" Director Kale closed his eyes for a brief moment. Parts website. A terminal block. the catalyst for an event that would rewrite xenopsychology textbooks. You did not break it through any fault of your own, he said carefully. The machine experienced a surge. Please, remain calm. We will open the door shortly. He turned off the speaker and looked at Lee. Seal all data logs. Classify this under my authority. No one else sees this, especially not the Thelian delegation. Cancel all further appointments for today. Tell them we have a critical systems failure. Lee nodded, already working. What do we tell him? He asked, nodding toward Jinwoo. The truth, Director Kale said. Or a part of it. He took a deep breath, a human gesture he had adopted, and walked to the chamber door. He pressed the manual release. The door slid open. Jinwoo stepped out quickly, like escaping a cage. I'm really sorry, sir. I don't know what I did. I was just standing there. Where is Yuna? Jinwoo asked, looking past the director. She is being informed, Director Kale said. He guided Jinwoo away from the door, back toward the control room. Mr. Lee, I need you to understand something. You did nothing wrong. In fact, you have given us remarkable data. Jinwoo looked at the screens. He saw the graphs, the jagged lines, the huge mountain-like wave that corresponded to the moment the lights died. He pointed at it. Is that me? It is a measurement of your mental activity, Director Kale said. That big one? That was when I was looking at the website. Yes, but I was just thinking about work. Jinwoo's confusion was total. That's all. It wasn't special. That is precisely what is remarkable, Director Kale said, his voice filled with a new awe. For other species, to create such a clear signal requires years of meditation, of learning to quiet all other thoughts. Your mind did the opposite. It gathered all its scattered thoughts and, without any intention, focused them perfectly on a single mundane problem. It created a coherence we did not think was possible for your species. The machine was not designed for that kind of accidental power. Yuna burst into the room then, her face tight with worry. Director, I came as soon as I got the alert. Jinwoo, are you okay? She rushed to her brother's side. I'm fine, he said, but I think I broke the expensive alien machine. Director Kale raised a calming hand. The machine was inadequate, Yuna, not your brother. His psi reading is not null. It is latent, suppressed by its own complexity. Today, we saw a glimpse of what happens when that suppression briefly fails. Yuna looked from her brother's baffled face to the shattered crystal to the data on the screens. Her scientific mind began to piece it together. Her eyes widened. The peak. It wasn't during the calibration? Technician Lee answered quietly. It was during his break, ma'am. He wasn't even concentrating on the test. He was thinking about a wiring part. The four of them stood in the dim control room, the only light coming from the screens displaying the impossible data. Jinwoo felt a headache coming on. All this talk of coherence and latent power. He just remembered the solution to the roof problem, and now he was at the center of some big scientific mystery. So, Jinwoo said slowly, breaking the silence, does this mean I'm done? Can I go to lunch now? I'm really hungry. Director Kale almost smiled. A strange, fragile expression on his alien face. The being who had just demonstrated a new form of consciousness was concerned with barbecue. Yes, Mr. Lee, you may go to lunch. He paused. But if, in the coming days, you have any particularly strong moments of distraction, of being lost in your work, please, make a note of it. It would be of great interest to us. Jinwoo just nodded, wanting only to leave the humming, broken room behind. He had given them their data. Now he wanted his ribs. The barbecue restaurant was loud and bright and full of normal human smells. Sizzling meat, smoke, and fermented sauce. Jinwoo chewed his food with relief. This was reality. This made sense. Yuna sat across from him, not eating much. She pushed a piece of lettuce around her plate with her chopsticks. Her mind was clearly still back in the broken control room. So, Jinwoo said after swallowing, am I in trouble? That thing looked expensive. No, Yuna said, looking up. You're not in trouble. Director Kale was very clear. The Institute covers equipment failure during testing. That's a rule. She put her chopsticks down. But Jean Wu, you understand what happened, right? The machine broke when I was thinking about work. Yes, but why it broke is the important part. It broke because your brain activity for a few seconds matched the power of a trained Thelian mystic. But you weren't meditating. You were shopping for parts. Jean Wu shrugged. So my brain is noisy. That's what the director said. It's not just noisy, Yuna said, leaning forward. Her voice dropped. It's too noisy. All the time. It's like a room where everyone is talking at once. But today, for a second, everyone in the room said the same word at the exact same time. The shout was so loud it broke the microphone. He thought about this. He pictured his garage, the radio playing, him humming, his hands working while he thought about 3 different jobs at once. That was just normal. So what does that mean? Do I have to go back? Do tests? I don't know, Yuna admitted. Director Kale is rewriting his report right now. The official finding will probably still be human null for the public records. But the private report, that will be different. Jean Wu didn't like the sound of that. He didn't want to be different. He wanted to be the guy who fixed scooters and wiring. What does different mean? It means, Yuna said carefully, that they might think all humans have this, that we're not psychically empty, we're just shielded by our own messy thoughts. And if that shield slips, even for a moment, we might be able to do things no one else can, without even trying. This was too big. Felt like a weight. Jean Wu shook his head. I didn't do anything, Yuna. I just solved a problem. That's it. I know. She finally smiled, a real one. And that's the most amazing part. A week passed. Jean Wu went back to his routine. He fixed the roof electrical problem at the old apartment building. It was exactly as he had pictured it, a corroded terminal block. He replaced it, sealed the conduit, and the breaker stopped tripping. The building manager was happy. Jean Wu got paid. It was a good feeling, a solid feeling. There was no strange hum, no glowing crystals, no one watching him. At the Institute, life was not as quiet. Director Kale had filed his confidential report. He called it the subconscious coherence hypothesis. He argued that human psi was not a tool to be used, but a weather pattern to be observed, unpredictable, powerful, and emerging from states of deep, unforced focus. The shattered crystal was kept as evidence, but the story told was of a faulty power surge. Only a few people knew the truth. Technician Lee was one of them. He found himself watching the human staff differently. He saw the architect lost in her sketches, muttering to herself. He saw the janitor whistling a complex tune while perfectly timing the cleaning bots. Were these moments of quiet, accidental harmony? Was every human, in their zone, a temporary psychic event waiting to happen? Director Kale called Yuna into his office one afternoon. The report was on his desk. Your brother? Director Kale began. Is he well? He's fine, Yuna said. Back to work. He fixed the problem he was thinking about, by the way. Of course he did, Director Kale said, a note of strange respect in his voice. The data suggests these coherence events are tied to completion, to the click of a solution. It is a psychic signature of satisfaction. He slid the report toward her. The council is intrigued and alarmed. They have asked for no further active testing on human subjects. It is deemed unpredictable. A new department is being formed. Passive observation. We will study human artisans, engineers, artists, not in labs, but in their natural environments. We will watch for the moments when they are not concentrating. Yuna read the first page. It was not about teaching humans to use psi. It was about learning to measure the psychic waves caused by a painter lost in color, or a mechanic understanding an engine. So we're not null, Yuna said. You are the opposite of null, Director Kale corrected. You are a roaring fire hidden by its own smoke. Our old instruments could only see the smoke. Now, thanks to your brother's wandering mind, we know to look for the occasional, brilliant flame that leaps through. That evening, Yuna visited Jean Wu in his garage. He was under the vintage scooter, only his legs visible. A radio was playing old rock music. He was humming along, off-key. She watched him for a minute. She saw the easy, thoughtless flow of his movements. His mind would be a storm of simple things. The feel of the wrench, the alignment of the bolt, the rhythm of the song, the plan for dinner. To the old machines, he was a flat line, a zero. But now she knew better. In this chaotic, comfortable storm of his consciousness, there was a potential for a different kind of power. A power that didn't come from focus, but from a lack of it. A power that appeared only when he was truly, simply being himself. "Jean Wu," she called over the music. He slid out from under the scooter, his face smudged with grease. "Hey, what's up?" "Nothing," she said, smiling. "I just wanted to see what you were working on." He grinned, holding up a carburetor. "Just cleaning this. It was all gummed up. It's almost done." His eyes were clear, focused on the present task. His mind a quiet hum of purpose. Yuna nodded. To any galactic observer, he was just a man in a garage. But she knew, and a few others now knew, that the most powerful Psi event ever recorded on Earth hadn't happened in a lab. It had happened because that man in the garage had been thinking about a $10 plumbing part. And he hadn't even been concentrating.